This is the last video on conflict resolution. Particularly, we're going to cover deletion, an alternate approach, and just look through some final terminology. So another possibility for delete is that we use a special symbol, a sentinel, to basically denote that something has been deleted. Modify, add, and search take the symbol into account. And for search, we treat the sentinel as you would treat a cell with a key different to the one you are searching for. Basically, if you see a sentinel, you keep searching. You just ignore it, treat it like a normal key. If you've found it, then you can probably just move it to the first deleted cell that you've found. For add, treat it as an empty and add it to the first deleted cell. So basically, if you're searching or deleting, we can use the first empty cell to either add the item or move it from the original position to the first deleted cell. That means we just reduce our chains, because the more deleted cells or sentinels that we have in our hash table, that's going to mean that we have longer probes. So by moving the item or adding it to deleted cells means that we reduce our chains. Keep in mind, this approach only works for adding. Think about what you would need to do if you are handling an update. Alright, some terminology here. So load factor is the number of items divided by the table size, basically suggesting how full the hash table is. A cluster is a sequence of full hash table slots, basically how many positions you have until you get to an empty slot. A cluster can form even when the load is small. So when the load factor is small, you can still get some clustering. So keep in mind, generally when a cluster forms, it tends to grow. That means it gets larger, making the cluster larger. So it may mean that multiple hash values are affected and more conflicts are caused by the fact that our cluster is getting bigger and affecting hash values in our hash table. So let's look at an example of a cluster. All four elements are part of the cluster. Two of them have the same hash value, and the other two have different hash values, 0 and 1. From then on, an element mapped to position 0, 1, 5, or 6 will be part of the cluster, and adding elements mapped to 0, 1, 2, 4, or 5, or 6 will make it grow. So tendency for clustering to occur as the load factor is greater than 0.5. So as we've mentioned earlier, once we get more than 50% full, we tend to get bigger clusters. We get lower speed on clustering, and adding a key with a hash value n can dramatically increase the search time for keys with values other than n. Deletion can also be time consuming, as the entire cluster needs to be rehashed. This means we start to under-deliver on the 0, 1 or the constant time complexity promise. If implemented in arrays, tables may become full fairly quickly. Resizing obviously should be avoided because it is time and resource consuming. So what can we do about this? So the idea is to reduce clustering by taking a bigger and bigger steps rather than always using +s. So previously up to now we've just used a +1 every time we've probed, whether we were searching or inserting. So the idea is, rather than using a single step size, we could change that step size to 2, 3, or a different number to ensure that we have more sparse data. So we can visualize the impact of large load factors as they go towards 0.1. You can see there's a significant increase, particularly when you start getting over 0.6 or 2/3. You can see that dramatic increase for items that are found and not found. Basically, you can see that their probe chains are getting very long. So the recommendation is not to let it ever get beyond 2/3, but even at 0.5 you can see that our probe chains are starting to increase. So it's even better if you keep the load factor under 0.5 to ensure that clusters don't become too large, and therefore our chains or probing are minimized as well. So in conclusion, hash tables are the most common data type, as they have O1 expectation for time complexity for adding, deletion, and searching, assuming they're built correctly. So that means we have a good hash function, and ideally we rehash when the load factor becomes too high to ensure that we don't have large clusters, and just make sure that all operations are performing quickly. There's a very good chance that you'll use in your professional career. Whilst they are conceptually simple, it becomes very hard to implement them in practice because it requires a lot of experimental data to fine-tune the characteristics of our hash function to make it quick. So that would include the table size and other prime numbers that make up our base and other parts of the function itself. A good choice of hash function, collision handling, and load factor are critical to maintaining an efficient hash table and keeping that O1 promise. In summary, we've looked at one of the open addressing methods, linear probing, and we've looked at the advantages, disadvantages of the length of probe, the memory usage, and the cost of resizing.